welcome to my channel. Today we are 7 days away from the first episode of the Loki series, and to celebrate this I'm counting down the 7 things that I'm most hoping to see in the Loki series. Just a warning, I will be basing some of this on theories and leaks that may or may not be true, so if you're afraid of potential spoilers, proceed with caution. Number 7. What the hell is going on in that desert scene and with Loki's hair? One of the few things we know for sure is that the starting point of the series will be Avengers Endgame. Thus, the Loki we will see escape to a parallel timeline is the same Loki from the first Avengers movie set in 2012. Yet many people have noticed that Loki's hair in the trailer looks very different from what it was in the Avengers. It's way curlier and it's also noticeably shorter. This has been bothering me from the start, and I'm not sure whether it's just that they did not hear about continuity or if it really does mean something. There is of course an extra-diegetic explanation for this. For the first time since the Thor movie, Tom Hiddleston grew his own hair out and dyed it black instead of wearing a full wig, as he had done in all the movies since The Dark World, or wearing extensions as he had done in the Avengers. Still, it seems hard not to notice the obvious lack of continuity between this look and that look. The trailer seems to suggest that the desert scene is happening immediately after the Avengers, but could this be misleading? Marvel are usually very careful with details, and here, unless Tesseract travel involves tropical rain, it is hard to see how Loki's hair could have changed so dramatically in just a few seconds or minutes, unless it takes much longer to travel through the Tesseract. We'll just have to wait and see. It is even more intriguing given that another short scene from the very first trailer released in December showed Loki in full Avengers garb with a hairstyle that seemed to be much closer to the Avengers hairstyle. So they could have done it if they wanted to. All it took was to straighten his hair. So this makes me wonder whether the desert scene is not in fact happening later on in the series. It does seem a little like a parody or a simulation of some kind, the way he uses his famous line, "I am Loki and I am burdened with glorious purpose." Sounds a bit off to me. Then again, Loki's a shapeshifter, so who's to know what his real appearance is supposed to be? Maybe this whole thing means nothing and we're just supposed to overlook the obvious difference in Loki's appearance. Anyway, on this first thing at least, my overthinking mind should be given satisfaction in the first episode of the series. Number 6. Loki having a friend. The idea of whether Loki will be able to make a friend has been teased by the series creator and by Tom Hiddleston for a while. In very recent interviews, Tom Hiddleston mentioned that the series had tried to put Loki in a different environment and to have him interact with different people other than Odin, Thor, Frigga or Heimdall for a change. In the Agent of Asgard comics, Loki finds a friend in Verity, a girl who can see through any lie. I personally really love Verity. I think she's a great match for Loki in terms of friendship, but so far we have no indication that she might be in the series. So clearly, from what we have seen in the trailers, the most obvious candidate to become Loki's friend is of course Mobius M. Mobius, the character played by Owen Wilson. We know that Mobius is a sort of Loki specialist. Think of him as a guy having a PhD on Loki's life or something. He's been monitoring everything that has happened in Loki's life, and he has developed a sort of fascination for Loki. Not very surprising. We can guess that the dynamic between them will be conflictual at first, but Mobius will probably become Loki's biggest advocate in the TVA. We can see that in the trailers already. And maybe he might even betray the TVA for Loki at one point. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. Some people even think that they might become more than friends, so they already have shippers. That would certainly be very interesting. The idea of exploring Loki's sexual identity has also been teased for a while, and there were rumours that he would have 2 romantic interests in the series, one male and one female, but we do not know if these rumours are true or not. Which leads me to number 5, the Enchantress. Tom Hiddleston himself said several years ago that if Loki's love life and or sexuality was to be explored, he would be interested in seeing his relationship with the Enchantress developed. Now, the Enchantress he was referring to was Amora, because she's one of the few characters who is actually shown having a relationship with Loki in the comics, but we have no indication of Amora being in the series. However, we do know that the character named Sylvie will appear in the series. Kaylee Fleming has been cast as young Sylvie, apparently. So will she also appear as an adult? We don't know. Sylvie is probably Sylvie Lushton, who is also an incarnation of the Enchantress in the comics, and they could very well have merged the two characters, or substituted Sylvie for Amora. Many believe that Sofia Di Martino's character, whom we have seen as a hooded figure in the trailers probably, and also sitting next to Loki in what looks like a quiet, intimate scene, is in fact Lady Loki, Loki in female form. However, my personal belief is that Sofia Di Martino's character is the Enchantress, and I hope it will turn out to be true. Not that I wouldn't like to see Lady Loki though. Number 4, Lady Loki, Kid Loki and Old Loki. There has long been speculation that Lady Loki will appear in the series. This speculation was reinforced by leaked set pictures of Sofia Di Martino wearing clothes that looked a lot like Loki's Asgardian armor from the Avengers. As I've just said, I hope Sofia Di Martino will turn out to be the Enchantress. Still, I also hope to see Lady Loki. I'm just a little bit conflicted about the idea that she might simply be one of the many Loki variants, because although I know the Loki variants are technically all Loki, it will feel a bit like they downplay the gender fluid nature of the character. Lady Loki is in fact Loki, and he just, switches from one shape to the other, so I would prefer that. Other characters that we can expect to see are Kid Loki, probably played by Jack Veal, and maybe older Loki, or King Loki as he's sometimes called, played by Richard E. Grant, maybe. We do know for sure that Richard E. Grant is part of the cast, but in none of the trailers could we see Richard E. Grant. He was nowhere to be seen. Some believe he will play a villain. In fact, King Loki is arguably a villain. Some believe he will play another villain, but I really do hope that he plays an older version of Loki. Just check out his interviews in case you do not know him. Not only does he have a certain resemblance to Tom Hiddleston, he also gives off the same kind of vibe. His calm, sophisticated manners and even his hand gestures just scream Loki to me. So I like the idea so much that I will actually be a little disappointed if he turns out to be another character. Number 3. Explanations for some of the holes in Loki's story. One of the reasons why Loki is often debated in the fandom, with everyone having a different vision of the character, is not just that he has gone through a lot of character development, but also that there are a lot of holes in his story. For example, if you think about the first Thor film, one of the things that was not really developed, not really defined clearly in the first film, was what kind of relationship did Thor and Loki really have before Loki snapped. We barely see them together at all before Thor's coronation, and then the crisis starts almost immediately, with Thor getting banished and Loki finding out about his true parentage. Both are deeply transformed by what they go through, but it remains unclear whether Loki simply changed completely when he learned of his true parentage, and of the fact that Odin never intended to let him be king, in fact, no matter what he did. Or if they always had or if Loki had always had this mischievous, meaner streak that simply became exacerbated in that moment. Another gaping hole in Loki's story is what happened to him between the end of Thor and the beginning of the Avengers. We know that he fell through the wormhole and survived. We know that he was recruited by Thanos on a mission to steal the Tesseract from Earth, but how exactly did that happen? How was he recruited? What happened to him when he was with Thanos? Some think Loki may have been brutalized or even tortured by Thanos. There are certainly some things in the Avengers, several scenes that seem to suggest that this might have been the case, especially if you look at the deleted scenes that show you a bit more of the dialogues between Loki and the other, who represents Thanos. It has also been made official by Marvel that Loki was being influenced by the Mind Stone during that film, and that the Mind Stone fueled his aggressivity, his anger towards Thor and the people of Earth. this is the quote from Marvel, "Arriving at the sanctuary through a wormhole caused by the Bifrost, Loki met the Other, ruler of the ancient race of extraterrestrials, the Chitauri, and Thanos. Offering the god of mischief dominion over his brother's favorite realm, Earth, Thanos requested the Tesseract in return. Gifted with a scepter that acted as a mind-control device, Loki would be able to influence others. Unbeknownst to him, the scepter was also influencing him, fueling his hatred over his brother Thor and the inhabitants of Earth." What we do not know, however, is how this influence actually worked, whether it was a full-blown mind control or simply a device that exacerbated feelings that were already there in Loki. Now, I know that recent interviews given by Tom Hiddleston and by the series creators seem to indicate that the series would be looking to explore Loki's character by taking him to new places rather than retreading old ground and trying to rewrite or retell the stories that we have already seen before. Still, the series takes place immediately after the Avengers, so it might not be completely unrealistic to expect some more information on what was really going on with Loki during that film. And one plot hole that I really hope will be explored or resolved by the series is Loki's death scene in Infinity War. Numerous Loki fans still don't understand how the Russo brothers could write a scene in which Loki tries to have a go at Thanos with a dagger. It just seems a very dumb move, very dumb thing to do, almost an insult to the character who is sometimes reckless, not very prudent, but highly intelligent, supposedly. Besides, his mysterious line to Thor, "The sun will shine upon us again," still hasn't been explained. It has often been pointed out that Loki had disappeared for a few seconds between the moment when the Hulk attacked and the moment when he came back to try and kill Thanos. One theory that has been in my mind for a while and that has also been set forward by several articles recently is that the Loki variant from the series might have taken the place of the original timeline Loki to die in his place, allowing the original Loki to live on. I would really love this theory to come true because it would solve so many problems at once. First, it will explain the apparent stupidity of Loki's move against Thanos, because it would then become an act of self-sacrifice with no intention of succeeding. It would explain also why he said this to Thor, because he knew that he would see him again. He knew that the true Loki would be saved. And finally, it would solve another problem, which is that many Loki fans, as happy as they were to hear that the series was happening, were a little bit sad to learn also that this would be 2012 Loki that we got back, which meant in practice that his entire character arc from the Dark World to Infinity War would basically be lost. The whole redemption arc that he had, it would be lost. Now, if the main Loki variant actually sacrificed himself for the other Loki, then at least the character development would be saved, it would not be lost, and that would be great. Number 2, Loki using the true extent of his magical powers. This one is a long-standing complaint from Loki fans. In the first Thor film, Loki had a lot of magical powers that included casting illusions of himself, even multiple ones, concealing objects, resistant to cold as a frost giant, the ability to use the casket of ancient winters as well. He was shown as quite powerful. In the second film, The Dark World, we saw a bit more of Loki's magic, more illusions, for the first time shape-shifting as well, illusions projected on other people. Thor was transformed into Sif at one point, and he also tried to trick Malekith into thinking he had cut off Thor's hand using his illusions. However, there was always a feeling that Loki's true power was never really showcased in any of the films, that he was kind of depowered or underpowered. In latest films in particular, Loki never really used his magic, preferring to use knives and daggers, which he has always used very skillfully, but it just seems strange that a powerful wizard like Loki would prefer to use such puny weapons, when he has so many powers at his disposal. In Thor Ragnarok, we see him use shape-shifting at the very beginning to pretend to be Odin, but he gets unmasked immediately. We then see him being utterly overpowered, outpowered by Doctor Strange, which he probably shouldn't be. And he never uses his magic again except once to try and double-cross Thor in Sakaar, at which he fails miserably again. But Of course, the worst offender of all is the same scene that I've already talked about earlier in Infinity War, the infamous butter knife scene, as many fans call it. No matter what you think on whether Loki's death at the hands of Thanos was a fitting ending for the character, it is hard to deny that it doesn't really make sense that he would go after Thanos with a dagger. Why would he go after Thanos with a dagger when he could use illusions, use his magical powers? In recent interviews, the creators of the series have suggested that Loki's powers would be explored, which makes me think that Loki fans can truly hope to get satisfaction on this account at last. So the trailers haven't shown much yet. We saw Loki use his shape-shifting abilities, hilariously only to dry himself, dry his hair and clothes. More interestingly, we saw him use green energy blasts to fight unidentified enemies, which would already add a new power to his arsenal. Another exciting image from the trailer was that of Loki wielding a flaming sword, which many people believe is his ancestral sword, Levitin, or I'm not sure how to pronounce it, also known as Damaged Twig, that's easier, from the comics. Though it could also be Gram, the Sword of Truth, another sword from the comics. In any case, I think we can really hope to see much more of this in the series. And finally, number 1, a nice balance between tragedy and comedy. Loki's always Loki, but Loki is multifaceted and mercurial, and if you watch all the MCU movies, you might feel like each one has a slightly different Loki. Personally, my favourite Loki is in the Dark World, and the main reason is I think it struck the perfect balance between comedy and tragedy. Thor, the first movie, was tipped heavily towards tragedy and featured a Loki who was going through a huge crisis about his identity and his purpose in life, driving him to madness and suicide, so there was little room for the lighter side of the god of mischief. Thor Ragnarok was the exact opposite, with Loki being mostly a source of comic relief or comedy, often at his own expense, which did not please some of the fans. I personally love this film and all of Loki's scenes in it, and there were actually a few emotional scenes as well, the elevator scene for example, but I still feel it lacked a little of the emotional depth that I really liked in The Dark World, for example. The Dark World, by contrast, struck the perfect balance in my opinion. I know this film has a terrible reputation, often being quoted as the worst MCU film, and I understand why to a certain extent, but I would still contend that everything in the movie that involves Loki or his relationship with Thor is actually top quality level. What I like best about Dark World Loki is that the film completely captures the complexity of the character. You have both some very tragic scenes, in particular the prison scene, where we see him at his lowest point ever, completely shattered by Frigga's death, and some really funny scenes where his mischievous and chaotic nature really shines, and it's a delight to watch him and Thor bicker, and for me, for the first time, they really feel like they're brothers. So what can we expect to see in the series? So far the trailers have been really tipped towards comedy. There's been a lot of comedy in the trailers, with Loki often being the butt of the joke, as he's being bullied and humbled by the TVA, though we can be sure that he will also be doling out a good dose of his own sarcasm. The dynamic between Mobius and Mobius, played by Owen Wilson, and Loki seems to be that of a comic duo, similar to a buddy cop movie almost, and we do know that Loki will quickly go from prisoner to an unlikely colleague for Mobius. I'm sure this dynamic will be a delight to watch, with the chemistry between the two actors looking great, and both of them being excellent at comedy. Owen Wilson, he's a comedy veteran, and Tom Hiddleston has amply demonstrated that his face acting and body language can be hilarious in Ragnarok, for example. However, I also really hope that the show is not only light-hearted comedy, as the trailer seems to suggest. I'm really hoping that they will use the longest screen time to truly explore Loki's complexity, and as Tom Hiddleston's favourite metaphor goes, play all those notes on that piano. And though we have seen little of this in the trailer, I gather from the recent interviews given by Tom Hiddleston, by director Kate Herron, or by the writer Michael Waldron, that we can actually hope to get this in the series. Many of us wonder whether Loki, being shown his entire life in the primary timeline, will involve some sadder moments, for instance his own death of course, but also Frigga's death. And a few of the shots from the most recent trailers also seem to feature a more serious, more downcast Loki, who seems to be involved in some sort of moral quandary, possibly facing his own erasure from the timeline. In any case, I do believe that the trailers focused on the comedy aspect, but that the actual series will contain a greater variety of tones, and I really hope so, because Loki's complexity and his ability to be both a little ridiculous, but also to inspire pity, emotions, to make us feel sorry for him, is really what I like best about the character. And I'm pretty sure I'm not alone in this. So that's it. Do you think we're likely to get any of these things in the series? What would you like to see in the Loki series? Let me know in the comments, and I will see you soon for more Loki videos. Bye bye!